She walked into the glittering ballroom with a stranger by her side. But tonight, appearances meant everything. The chandeliers above cast light on faces that judged, whispered, and remembered her failures. Just months ago, her ex had left, her broken. Now he was marrying someone else, and she had to prove she wasn't the lonely outcast her family believed her to be. But when she asked a man to pretend for just one night, she never imagined he'd become the only person willing to love her for real, in a world that wasn't ready to accept it. The hall shimmered with gold and white, every corner adorned with roses, crystal glasses, and laughter that wasn't meant for her. Sophia Lancaster adjusted the hem of her ivory dress, her heart pounding against the silence she carried inside. Tonight was not just another evening. It was the wedding of her ex-fiancé, the man who once promised forever, only to walk away when her family's fortune crumbled. She had been the perfect daughter, raised in a family where appearances defined worth. Her father, a wealthy businessman, built a reputation on elegance and tradition, while her mother obsessed over social standing. To them, failure wasn't allowed, and love was never enough if it didn't fit the mold of status, power, and expectation. When Sophia was abandoned, whispers spread quickly. People at charity galas and garden parties smirked behind her back, branding her as the woman not good enough to keep a man. The sting of betrayal left scars deeper than heartbreak. It became public humiliation, and now, walking into her ex's wedding alone meant surrendering to their ridicule. But Sophia wasn't prepared to be the evening's tragic spectacle. She had made a choice, a desperate, unthinkable choice. Hours earlier, she had crossed paths with Marcus Reed, a man whose presence seemed as steady as stone. He wasn't from her world of chandeliers and crystal. His life was built on resilience, strength, and quiet dignity, shaped by experiences her sheltered upbringing could never comprehend. He stood taller than most, dressed in a simple suit that seemed to belong more to a courtroom than a ballroom. His deep eyes held something rare, honesty, maybe even pain. But when she asked him the question no stranger should ever be asked, he had listened. "Will you pretend to love me tonight?" she had whispered. Marcus had no reason to say yes. A working man, a black man, he knew the stares that followed him in places like this. Rooms filled with privilege didn't welcome men like him, not without suspicion. Yet he agreed, not for her world, not for her pride, but for reasons even she couldn't yet understand. And so, hand in hand, they stepped into a room that was never built for them to share. The whispers began instantly. The eyes turned, some with shock, some with scorn, some with envy. The evening had only begun, and already the air was thick with judgment. What neither of them knew was that before the night ended, their pretended bond would awaken truths neither dared to face, about love, race, and what it means to belong in a world built to keep them apart. The moment Sophia and Marcus entered the ballroom, the hum of music and chatter faltered like a skipped heartbeat. People noticed. They always noticed. Whispers didn't need to be loud. They had a way of cutting deeper than shouts. Sophia could feel it. The glances of old family friends, the raised brows of women who once envied her, the smirk of her ex-fiancés, mother who had never liked her. Every pair of eyes told a story, and none of them were kind. But instead of shrinking under their judgment, Sophia straightened her back, letting Marcus's steady hand on hers be her anchor. Marcus felt the sting of those looks too. It wasn't new. The way men in suits looked him up and down, measuring, him, questioning his worth before a word was spoken. The way women whispered into champagne glasses, their curiosity dripping with condescension. For Sophia, this was humiliation. For him, this was survival. A reminder of battles fought quietly every day. The first confrontation came sooner than expected. A family acquaintance approached with a thin smile. He congratulated Sophia's ex across the room, then turned to her with a saccharine voice that dripped with insult. "Oh, Sophia, it's surprising to see you here. And who is your friend?" The pause before friend carried the weight of centuries. The man's eyes flicked toward Marcus with a sharpness that tried to pierce his dignity. Sophia didn't hesitate. She laced her fingers tighter into Marcus's and smiled. "This is Marcus," she said firmly. "He's with me." The words echoed like defiance, daring anyone to question it. The man's smile faltered. He nodded stiffly, muttered something about enjoying the evening, and walked away. But the damage was done. More heads had turned. More whispers had begun as the night unfolded, the tension thickened. At the dinner table, guests exchanged sly remarks, speaking as though Marcus wasn't there. They praised the groom's career, his wealth, his good match, while making veiled comments about fitting in with the right circles. Every word was a knife wrapped in silk. Sophia watched Marcus's calm exterior, but she could feel the storm beneath. He was too proud to flinch, too seasoned to react, yet the silence between his clenched jaw and measured breath told her everything. The most cutting moment came during the first dance. The groom and his bride swayed under soft lights, the room filled with applause. As Sophia and Marcus stood watching, a woman nearby whispered just loud enough. She must be desperate, bringing someone like that. Sophia's chest tightened. Her old shame, the humiliation of her broken engagement, the whispers of her downfall, all threatened to consume her. But then she glanced at Marcus. He didn't look broken, humiliated, or defeated. He looked steady, as though he carried not only himself, but her as well. In that moment, Sophia realized this wasn't about pretending anymore. It wasn't just a performance to hide her loneliness. Standing beside Marcus, she felt stronger than she ever had. Yet she also knew the night was far from over. The cruelty of others was sharpening, preparing to strike. And when it did, neither she nor Marcus could leave unchanged. The music slowed, the laughter grew louder, and the air turned heavier with each passing moment. It was during the toast, that inevitable ritual of pride and performance, when the night reached its breaking point. The groom's father, a man of reputation and wealth, stood with his glass raised. His words flowed with the authority of someone used to admiration, his smile broad, his voice booming. He praised his son's achievements, his new bride's graceful choice, and the union of two families with shared values. Guests applauded, the clinking of glasses ringing like an orchestra. But then, almost as an afterthought, his gaze landed on Sophia across the room. His words curved, sharpened. "And though some may take unusual paths after heartbreak," he said, his smile hardening, "we must remember that not every companion is meant for the table of legacy. Some are simply temporary comfort." The room froze. The meaning was unmistakable. A ripple of nervous laughter darted across the guests, followed by uncomfortable silence. All eyes turned toward Sophia and Marcus, as though they were the spectacle of the evening. Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. Shame pressed down like a weight, threatening to crush her. The humiliation of being publicly reduced to a mistake, of Marcus being labeled as less than, cut deeper than she had ever imagined. Marcus, however, did not flinch. His hand remained steady on the table, his shoulders squared, his eyes locked on the speaker. For a moment, the room seemed to expect him to bow his head, to take the insult quietly, to play the role so many had scripted for him. But he didn't. Instead, he rose. Slowly, deliberately, his tall frame commanded silence. The music had stopped, the waiters paused mid-step, and even the clinking glasses stilled. Marcus didn't need to shout. His presence alone demanded attention. He looked at Sophia first, not at the man who insulted them, not at the guests who sneered, but at her. His eyes spoke of something beyond pretense, beyond the arrangement they had agreed upon. There was no performance now, no pretending. In that silent exchange, Sophia saw the truth. He wasn't standing because of pride alone. He was standing for her, for them. The whispers surged again, sharper this time. A woman muttered, How dare he? A man hissed under his breath, "Sit down." But Marcus didn't waver. His silence was heavier than words, his calm more powerful than any retort. Sophia, trembling, felt something break free within her. She too rose, her fingers intertwining with Marcus's. The gesture was small but explosive, a defiance louder than any speech. Gasps echoed through the hall. Some were scandalized, others secretly awed. The groom's father's face darkened, his smile faltered, his authority cracked. For the first time he looked unsettled, as if the certainty of his power had been shaken. Sophia's ex, standing near the bride, shifted uncomfortably, his confidence slipping. His new wife glanced, between Sophia and Marcus, her smile trembling under the weight of something she couldn't name. In that moment, the ballroom was no longer theirs. It belonged to Sophia and Marcus. They hadn't shouted, they hadn't fought. They had simply stood, together, hand in hand, unmovable against the storm. What began as humiliation transformed into revelation. Sophia no longer cared about whispers or glances. The shame she once feared had been burned away by the fire of Marcus's quiet strength. And Marcus, who had endured countless moments of silent injustice, had found a space where he was not alone in defiance. The night was not over. The world outside the ballroom would remain cruel, judgmental, and relentless. But here now they had reclaimed their dignity, not through words, but through unshaken unity. The party stumbled forward after that charged moment, but something had shifted. The orchestra resumed, glasses were raised again, yet the room carried a quiet unease. Guests who once laughed freely now glanced toward Sophia and Marcus with uneasiness, some out of disdain, some out of newfound respect. Sophia felt the weight of every eye, but for the first time that night it didn't crush her. Instead, she felt taller, stronger, as though Marcus's hand anchored her to something unshakable. Their silent defiance had redefined the evening, no longer about shame, but about courage. The groom's father, humiliated by the break in his carefully orchestrated performance, tried to recover. He spoke again, weaving empty words about unity and family legacy, but the power in his voice was gone. The guests clapped politely, yet many knew they had witnessed something he could never erase. A moment where his cruelty had been exposed and his authority undermined by nothing more than two people choosing dignity over submission. As the night drew on, whispers followed Sophia like shadows. Some judged her. She's lost her mind, embarrassing herself. Others whispered envy. Did you see the way he stood for her? No man here would dare. She didn't respond to any of it. The world around her blurred, her focus fixed, only on Marcus, the man who had turned a night of pretense into a night of truth. When they finally left the ballroom, the cool air of the night washed over them like a blessing. Sophia breathed deeply, letting the weight slide from her shoulders. Marcus walked beside her in silence, his calm presence saying more than words ever could. She realized then that this wasn't the end of a performance. This was the beginning of something real. The days that followed were not easy. Sophia's ex and his family spread whispers, trying to twist the story, painting her as reckless, Marcus as opportunistic. Yet for every cruel tongue there were others who remembered the quiet bravery they had witnessed, a kind of courage money or status could never buy. Sophia found herself invited into conversations she had never expected. Women whispered to her privately, confiding how they too felt trapped by expectations, how they longed for even a fraction of the courage she had shown. Marcus received nods from strangers on the street, subtle acknowledgments from those who knew what it meant to be unseen, disrespected, yet still unbroken. Still, racism and class prejudice did not disappear overnight. They never do. There were still rooms that would not welcome Marcus, still faces that would look at him with suspicion rather than respect. But Sophia had stopped caring about fitting into those rooms. She no longer longed for their acceptance because she had found something deeper, acceptance of herself and a love that did not bow to the cruelty of others. Their bond grew, not in grand gestures, but in small, quiet moments. Late-night walks where Marcus shared pieces of his past he had kept hidden. Early mornings where Sophia discovered strength she never knew she had. Together, they built something that wasn't born out of pretending, but of truth. In time, those who once mocked began to fall silent. Not because they changed their hearts, but because the unshakable strength of Sophia and Marcus made their cruelty irrelevant. The whispers lost their power when faced with a love that didn't need approval to exist. And years later, when Sophia looked back at that fateful night, she no longer remembered the sting of humiliation. What she remembered was Marcus rising. The stillness of his presence, the warmth of his hand in hers. The moment when pretense ended and something real began. It was a story she would tell not with bitterness, but with pride. Because what began as a desperate attempt to escape shame had turned into the discovery of a love that no stage, no audience, no prejudice could break. For the guests at that wedding, it was just one night. For Sophia and Marcus, it was the night that changed everything. And for anyone watching their story now, it raises a question that lingers long after the music fades. When the world tries to reduce you to whispers, will you bow your head in silence? Or will you stand, hand in hand with those who see your worth and rewrite the ending for yourself?